Hello, y'all. Hey, what's going on? What's going on? Oh man, another episode. We got Nature Mom coming on. I'm gonna have to actually change the title. She actually was just briefing on that situation, but she really. We're gonna go back to into the title we had last week, dealing with the kids and the whole transgender thing, and in the school systems and in the here here in the US. So we're gonna deal with that. I She just got the information today on Russia. Like she thinks it's still a coup going on. And I said, no, it's been resolved. So the coup or attempted coup has been resolved. Prigozhin and Putin and Poroshenko from Belarus, they all worked something out, and uh, things have been worked out. So now Prigozhin is in Belarus now, and the Wagner Group won't be charged with any sedition or any type of treason. What's going on, Nature Mom? What's going on?
Hello there.
Hey,
Hello. Can you
hey,
hear me okay?
yeah, hear you good. Yep.
All right, fantastic.
Uh
All
huh.
right.
Yep.
So we're in.
Cool.
Okay.
Right on time. All right. Yes.
Ah,
So,
thank
hey,
you. Such a great crew.
so
You're always giving shout outs. Can I give some shout outs today?
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, of course.
Ah, okay. So I would like to give a huge shout out um to Eddie Weber.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I would like to give a big shout out to Noki and a big shout out to Junior and to Rachel, always supporting the efforts here.
Cool.
So it's yeah, big.
All right. How's my
Thank
mic
you.
sound? Yeah.
Your mic sounds good,
Okay.
actually.
Cool. Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah, it's really
Yeah.
great today.
Yep.
So we're missing one screen. We had a little damage, so we're one screen down, which brings us to a limited area of research.
Oh,
So
got you. Okay,
yeah, we had a
okay.
little accident here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I
and
had
it
an
comes
accident. My laptop. I got to replace some of the components because some liquid got on it, and
oh,
yeah, shorted
oh,
it out.
that's
So
that's
I
even
didn't know.
worse.
Yeah, yep. So I had to order
So
the
y-
components.
yeah, so you're talking about whole motherboard there.
Um. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully it didn't
So,
get to the motherboard, but I'm gonna test it and see. I'm gonna test it because
so
yeah, the part was a wire connecting to the main board to the motherboard, but it was the hinges that got messed up.
ah,
So I don't know if the motherboard was
oh,
affected or anything else.
that's more mechanical. We'll
Hmm.
see if it's only the like moving parts. That's
Yeah.
not as bad as the electrical parts.
Well, what's so bad is in between the moving part were some electrical parts that connect. So those,
So it's to be seen. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, well, yeah, it's a work
Okay.
in progress. Yeah.
Little hair. Sorry.
Hmm.
Very everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. So unfortunately today we only have an hour.
Okay,
So
that's fine. That's fine.
yeah, so I
That's
really
fine.
want to jump right in. And I see MD hasn't joined us yet, but yeah, thanks so much to MD for all of the discussion and insightful questions. Because yeah, there's a lot. This is a heavy topic, and I think that one of the biggest issues of this particular topic is that when you say anything that really questions, let me restate that. When you
Hmm.
say that anything that brings questions to this topic,
Hmm.
for the side that's really trying to rally for it, especially for accepting the treatments that are ongoing at this moment and the conversation that's happening in classrooms and children's classrooms. When you are questioning these things, then you're really brought about as the enemy of the public and the enemy of the state. And I think that that is something that needs to be challenged. And I'm okay. make me the enemy because I'm not afraid. I've been up against a corner before many,
Right.
and when I notice when I'm standing on the side of my children, when I'm standing on the side of the laws and justice and science, I'm okay with anybody trying to challenge me because then it lets me know I'm heading in the right direction. You know,
Right.
as it was said to me once in my youth, you know, when you are going in the right direction, you're going to make a lot of wolves howl. And
Ah, I like that.
yeah, yeah, I like that too. And
Hmm.
so in this topic, you know, I noticed that you know, Matt Walsh and you know his I don't say that you know, I'm an advocate for Matt Walsh in any way, but I really respected his pursuit for the truth. And what was interesting to me was how many people would not listen to the question that was being posed. They were more offended that there was a question being posed to them at all.
Right.
And to me, that just is a pure sign of ignorance.
Yeah.
Whenever someone doesn't take the moment to listen to the question, even if you don't agree with the question that's being posed, take a moment to listen,
Hmm.
because your listening really it really shows your ability towards emotional maturity, and it shows your ability towards intelligence,
Right.
because listening doesn't mean agreement. It means that you have the ability to process information in the given time. And people don't really realize that they're so busy already having dialogue in their head that they can't listen to any of the information being given to them in the moment. And
Right.
you know, I think that that's one of the things that he really brought forward for me in the particular conversation that he was presenting on. The question was, what is a woman? And even women, he went to a rally of a feminist rally, you know, of women fighting for women's rights. And when he posed the question, all they could do was oppose him. They weren't
Mm.
taking the time to listen.
Right.
And I think that it was a very valid question. So, in this day and age, you know, we are being brought with these different scenarios. Okay, historically, out of context, I get it. But there are different scenarios where when we ask the question, what is a woman? Um, and then we're presenting, you know, articles showing pregnant men, because that's what the what was that, Vanity Fair? Let me be accurate here.
Okay.
I'm missing I'm missing some information here. Some my phone. But let me just make sure that that's what we were dealing with.
Okay.
It was a Vanity Fair, possibly. Pregnant man. Yeah. So it was Vanity Fair. So I really appreciated this particular article, this his approach to this article, because be reminded, Vanity Fair was the first magazine that even presented a pregnant woman as a centerfold, yeah, centerfold. So a center, you
Right.
know, model or topic
Okay.
for the public to acknowledge as something beautiful, as something fashionable. And that was in August of 91 with
Right.
Demi Moore on the cover. She was the
Oh.
first pregnant person presented on a cover of a magazine in
Okay.
her nude state. I mean, she did cover herself with her hands, but she was topless in that photo.
Okay.
So Vanity Fair is also the same magazine that presented, and let me like present it as it was presented to me by Vanity Fair UK. Um, Pregnant transgender man Logan Brown stars on the cover of Vanity Fair. So I
So
think
then,
that
how can a male be pregnant? I mean, are they talking about installing functioning uteruses? I mean, they haven't done that. So how we have a pregnant man?
That's a very valid question. So, biologically, so let's just say, for example, that Logan Brown, whatever name, by like birth name was given, name chosen. Logan Brown has their body exhumed 100 to 1,000 years from now, and we're just examining the bones, we're looking at the pelvis, we're looking at anatomical structuring here, and we're just wondering what biological human are we exhuming here. So just by the shape of the pelvic itself, um, there are no hormones and there's no
But we don't have to
surgery.
go that far. We could just go to
I
simply
think I
hold on,
don't
hold
think
on, hold
it's
on.
it's that
We could
far.
simply go to where you have women who cannot have children because we have not don't have the technology of transferring functioning uteruses over to different human beings. That is not scientifically possible at this time.
So I understand what you're saying,
Okay.
and what I'm saying in conference to that is that when we're analyzing just the anatomy,
Yeah, but how would they explain a pregnant male when you can't even get past like, okay, well,
and
how
that's
did he
kind of the
get
point.
the
When we
right? How did
exhume
he
that
get the
body a
uterus
hundred
in?
to a
in
thousand years from now,
uh-huh.
we're going to see that it was a pregnant human being. We're not going to question that at all because we'll be
I'm
able to
not going.
tell.
No,
We'll be able to
I
tell,
want to question it now.
right?
Though. I want to question it right
Okay,
now.
so that's what I'm saying. So if they're able to 1,000 years from now, we're not going to have any skin, we're not going to have any opinions, we're not going to have any dysmorphia or dysphoria. We're going to only have what data is in front of us, which will be the remains, and the remains will tell us that that was a female.
Okay, but what I think you're missing my point. My point
I'm
is that
trying to
they
catch it.
show. Okay, so when they well, okay, were they just making a parody of a male being pregnant, or were they trying to sell this off as an actual male being pregnant? I'm lost.
So as I read you the title of the article, they are presenting this as a transgender male.
Okay, and how did the okay, so apparently so they I guess they don't expect any fact checkers to do any research, scientific research or have any scientific sense. So a transgender male, are they saying that the transgender male had a functioning uterus transform into the body?
Okay, so a person who's worked with children a long time, you have to learn how to break many complicated things down to simple language. So I
Hmm.
think that when you speak to me and you say transgender male, my
Hmm.
brain in its very simplistic state is going to automatically say, okay, a person born a woman or a female. It's not going to question any of the other terminology. It's just going to bring me right back to the original source. So when someone puts the term transgender male, um, I I think that it's exactly that. So we're not talking about you know something so sensationalized and extraordinary as a man having a pregnant body. We're talking about a human being that was born a female, still has all of the parts
Yeah, but Nature, I
intact.
think you're missing my point, though. I think
Okay,
you really. I think we're on having two different conversations. Let's stop.
so
Let's
so
stop. Let's just let's pump the brakes. Operation. Okay, there is no cases of a successful human beings of a uterus being transferred to a human being, that being woman, man, whatever, of a successful functioning uterus. This would be major right now. This would be like a scientific breakthrough. You can't even do this with women. So how the hell did the scientific community let this farce of nonsense go through? Because I'm talking we're just talking about pure science here.
Okay,
You know,
so
because
we're actually
one thing I'm all for is scientific breakthroughs, and there is no scientific breakthrough of no successful uterus being transferred to another human being.
okay.
That's where I'm at right now. I'm right there. Right, I
Okay.
got to get past this.
So you're presenting science to me here.
Right.
And that's sorry. That's just a thing. We can't really put much science to this because no science has been operated yet. Um, and I think
So
that's
the
the bottom
science
line
of
to
this
that.
has not been challenged.
This is not a science conversation, no. And the science community is quiet about this because there's no science here.
Oh, there's no science here. Okay, because I'm like, yeah, because my mind, I'm thinking science. And I'm thinking, when I think about science, I'm always thinking about science breakthroughs. And there's nothing in here that reflects science breakthrough because they don't even have this for women. Like there are women, generations of women upon women who cannot have kids.
No,
Am I
this is
missing something here?
no,
There are
this is
women in
I mean,
every
I
country,
think
of
that
every race, of every nation that cannot have kids. So you would be talking about if you could have a a male have a baby, then this would be a scientific breakthrough. Wow.
okay, so
This would
once
be a
again,
scientific breakthrough.
we're
So
talking about a
as a person that's
transgender
into
male.
science, I'm very insulted right now because this is playing with. You're talking about a scientific breakthrough. This
I mean,
would be major.
okay, so when like going back, and I think we were talking about the same thing before, and I'll kind of like walk you through
Okay,
this.
so you cleared
Is
it. It's
that
not a scientific. This is more of a farce,
it's more of
a
really trying to.
fantasy, more farce, fantasy. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's not science.
So what we're doing is we're changing definitions here because once again, as I said earlier, and I think we were talking about the same thing, when we use the term transgender in front
Hmm.
of male, it's almost like saying opposite, right? So when you
Hmm.
say transgender male, you're saying opposite of male, which is
Hmm.
female. When you say transgender female, what you're saying is opposite of female. Okay, we're not talking right now. We're not talking about people's, dysmorphia, dysphoria. We're not talking about their feelings. We're only talking about science in this conversation. So when you're using those terms in science, you're telling us right away opposite. When you use
Hmm.
transgender, it's saying we are talking about someone who is identifying, so they have a feeling or an emotion towards this preference. But in the science community, when we're talking about chromosomes and we're just breaking it down to simple science, which is the fundamentals here, then we're talking transgender equals opposite. So if someone says to me transgender and then male, then it's translating in my head as okay, chromosomal female. If someone says transgender female, then in my head it's going okay, chromosomal male.
Hmm.
So I think that that's important. So what you're talking about here is language and and like language versus science. And is the term transgender merely language and emotions and feelings and ideology? I would say yes at this point. We're not talking about anything that is hard facts to future re-referencing. So again, what I'm saying is if we like project ourselves into the future and we're only looking at bones and we want to find out what bones we're dealing with so that we can do further analysis, then we're going to do the DNA testing. And
All
when
right.
we do the DNA testing, it's going to let us know that this human being has female chromosomes. And so, therefore, it's not surprising of the pelvis shape. It's not surprising that this person was able to conceive a child. Uh, so, therefore, this person was born a woman.
Okay.
If that answers much more broadly.
It doesn't. it's a whole different conversation. But okay,
It does okay. So
uh,
I'm not sure why it's different,
it's
but
different because I'm looking for the specific like um why they would feel it was okay to say this was a gender male. Was this a farce? Was this a parody? Was this like some type of
not
fantasy wish? That's all.
so once again, they didn't say gender male, they said transgender male.
Yeah, I think we're having two conversations again.
Uh,
I don't think you're hearing me. Was this a farce? Was this some type of comical parody about the pregnant
I'm not
transgender
sure
man?
if it was meant to be a parody or not, to be honest with
What
you.
was it meant to
I'm not
be?
I'm not I don't work for Vanity Fair, so I don't know what the objective is here.
Okay, so we
Um,
both agree that it wasn't due to science, so it wasn't based
I
in
mean,
science.
Vanity Fair, no, there's not
Okay,
much science right there. No.
okay,
When we
okay.
talk about Vanity Fair, we're
So,
talking about sensationalism.
so
We're
fantasy,
talking about, sales. We're talking about,
fantasy.
really like eh,
Okay, okay, I'm gonna write.
grabbing an audience. Science is not necessarily trying to grab an audience. We're just trying to deal with evidence and facts,
So we're dealing with fantasy.
if you like to call it that.
I mean, since we're talking language, I mean, I'm trying to find something that what this falls into. So apparently, it's not science. So are they feeding a fantasy here? Are they feeding
I
um,
mean, I would
or
definitely say, like, would you
wishful
call
thinking?
okay,
Huh?
so I'll ask you this way. Would you call politics a fantasy?
I'll call politics direct control of resources. So no, I would say not. No.
So I would call politics a fantasy. It's not something that's necessary for human existence. It does not have any basis, and it is based on, charismaticism. It is based on human-born ideologies, and it is not something that we need for survival. It does not cover any of the basics of survival. So for me, it is a construct. So if you want me to compare apples with apples, is politics a construct, and is transgenderism, and the language put behind both of those things a construct? Absolutely, it's constructive. It is like putting in the society ideals that this is something that is concrete to that society, when truly the only things that are concrete to any living beings is food, water, and the ability to survive. And those are the three things. And when we're talking about survival, then we're talking about evolution. We're talking about adaptations. We're talking about mutations. We're talking about just being able to adjust to the environment as it is. Now,
Right.
these are environments, in my opinion, when we're talking about ideological environments. We're talking about environments that are constructed by humans and that have no basis. If there was any other, let's say natural catastrophic event, it would be the last thing on our topic, because it's not essential to our basic survival. I think that, like, if we had a massive earthquake, if we had huge volcanoes, if we had a tsunami that wiped out more than half of a society, the last thing that we would be talking about in that particular survival moment would be transgenderism. We would only be talking about the basic needs. And do these categories fit under basic needs? Absolutely not, if that's what you're asking me.
I'm lost. Oh my gosh, you go around 285. I'm just, oh gosh.
I mean, if so once again, we're talking about language here. So if
Yeah.
we're just breaking down language to its basic necessities, and we bring necessity down to a scientific survival point, no, those things do not fit in those scientific survival points.
Okay. So, um, I'm okay. So I guess we need to just push forward to this whole agenda thing because yeah, we getting bogged down into this whole definitions and all that because you lost me
I
with the
think that,
politics
and I
because
think
I'm
that
thinking yeah.
and I think that that's just the main issue of this. Like, there's so many, like, feelings and emotions and science. Let me, if I can. You just brought me to a very important point that I had to research myself. So,
Okay.
Oxford Dictionary. When I looked up, because I'm looking at what I need to investigate as a scientist is the why. Why is this happening, and why is this happening as such a spike right now? Why do we have such a spike of young people, of people in general, who really need to focus on this topic at this particular point in time? So it makes me look at the difference of many different body, let's say, how do I put this in the simplest terms? When we are not satisfied with our current body positioning. In one definition, what we used to call it, so when we're looking at disorders like anorexia, bulimia, we would call it body, uh, this type of body distortion, correct?
Right.
This distorted view of ourselves. We look at ourselves in a mirror, we are skinny, but we think we're fat. We have this distorted view of it, correct? And when I looked at Oxford language describes distortion as the action of distorting, to change the state of being equals distorted, correct? But then when we look at the Webster's dictionary, Merriam-Webster's dictionary of distortion, they define it as the act of twisting or altering something out of its true, natural, or original state.
Okay.
And the question that I have to ask as a person who studies science and
Mm-hmm.
really want to bring that down is, why would one definition, be different from another? And I much more respect the clarity of distortion, as in twisting, altering something that's true to distort. When you distort something, you change its original state, is how I grew up with this definition. Yet in the Oxford definition, it's changing the definition. It is not exactly, it's saying that we're trying to mislead in some way, or that it's a state of distortion, but there's no clarity to what that actually means. So the reason why I'm asking this question is because I want to know the difference between dysmorphia and dysphoria. Okay. So when we talk about what is dysmorphia, dysmorphia is a distorted view of oneself. Dysphoria, and usually dysphoria is used in the definition pertaining to transgenderism, they do not see it as dysmorphia. They do not see it as a change of its original state. And I think that that's a very interesting, like, play, as you're saying. We're changing definitions here. What is it? What is the bottom line, universal definition that we can all stick to here? And we can't stick to even a definition because, excuse me, different um, different dictionary sources are now giving us different views of what distortion is.
Right. A lot of it is being altered. So
It's being altered.
my I guess my question would be, uh, Vanity Fair would be pushing an agenda to
So,
basically
in my view,
tap into
Vanity Fair
people's
is distorting
right,
reality.
distorting. Right, okay.
So what it's saying is, this is because when they use transgender, knowing that everyone does not understand the definition of what transgender is, and then they put
Right.
transgender male, then they are distorting the idea that this is a male somehow,
Hmm.
and this male is able to have a baby.
Right.
And that is distortion. The original state
Right.
of that human being was female. So it's not surprising at all that this human being was able to conceive a child. So the only distortion that is happening here is trying to make us believe something that is not from its original state.
Right. Okay. Um, so basically, to fool people who are, well, I mean, because there's a lot of people who don't buy it. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of people who are, on the right, and they're speaking out against it. They had a just recently they had a faith, and I forgot it was called faith and something. It was a dinner, and they had all these pastors and preachers. It was basically the religious community, and then the keynote speaker, of course, was Donald Trump. But the they weren't going for it. They weren't going for it. I mean, they explained things not so much in a scientific view, but more of a biblical common sense view. And so, yeah,
I'm sorry, I would not add biblical and common sense in the same conversation, but
I
okay.
wouldn't either, but I see where they were going because I understand, and just like you understand the religious mindset. So I don't use that. I don't prescribe to that at all, but I do understand their concerns, saying that God created, Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. So that's what I mean by the religious jargon. They have their jargons that they use. And I'm not disagreeing with it. You know what I'm saying? A little extreme, but some may say a little fanatical, but I mean I agree with the basic their basic sentiment where they were going. And they were saying that, look, man, transgender going after the children is wrong. They're saying the same thing that you're saying, just in a
Okay.
different way, just in a more religious way, non-scientific, more religious way. So yeah,
Mm.
so there are people, but again, I guess if they pit a certain amount of people against another certain amount of people, they get more people, then they feel like they've won. And so that's why you
Okay.
have the Vanity Fairs, you have the media, you have
Yeah.
all these different outlets
It's a
pushing.
it's a
Right.
declaration of war, and I like that you put that in this conversation because it is a pulling to choose sides.
Right.
And the only side that I choose at this point is, as with um any war situation. I mean, the first thing that you most people, in media in the common world, focus on is, let's try to get the women and the children and the elderly out first,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And in this situation, it's just the opposite. We're not getting the women out of this at all. We're actually, in my opinion, when you have human beings that were born male with a completely different and functional anatomy, much more muscular tonality built into their system over
Right.
women, and you have them competing against women for women to lose. I think that automatically, you are throwing women right on the front line of this war. And then when you put, uh, let's say, soldiers right in the classrooms to indoctrinate your children. This is the last thing that we want. We've learned from the past. We learned from, Hitlerism. We've learned from many different fanatical points of views. When you start to put, dogmatic points of views in a classroom, then you really bring, an ideology that, in retrospect, is looked upon very negatively. And we weren't satisfied with the idea of eugenics and of racism and of extermination that was put into the classrooms in SS, Nazi Germany. Yet I'm not saying that this is the same caliber of brutality, but in a sense, when you are like using, you know uh natural development of children and the confusion that Freud and Piaget have always, the fathers of psychology have already deemed as completely normal, and you have people, let's say, preying upon that in a way, like, flying their flags and their sexuality in a classroom setting where there's already natural confusion. when you're putting, this leadership in social media, when you know that these kids will much rather sit and scroll and surf, internet ways and social media sites versus, picking up a book and reading these days, then you are bound to have children following something that they completely don't understand. And that's where I have a huge problem. Not only is it children who are following something they completely don't understand, but now you have the pressure of parents. Your children are very sure, that they are not, the body that they were born in. They're very sure that they feel a certain way at 10, let's say 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. They're sure of their future. And yet, um, we bring doctors and psychologists and these specialists in to talk to the parents and these children,
Right.
and the doctors and psychologists also confused, not sure, and saying, okay, the laws aren't behind us because there's no laws that promote giving hormone blockers to children. Not yet. I've searched it. I'm trying to find the hardcore, the country that is completely behind and changing their laws so that children are allowed by law to be given these hormone blockers, and I can't find one yet.
So is it just the United States only,
The
or
United
Mexico? Well,
States, it
Mexico.
is not legal. There's nothing in the legal system. I'm researching the data, and
Okay.
there's no data that determines that giving hormone blockers to a person that's underage,
Uh huh.
giving hormone blockers to a minor, is not a legal practice. And there are many doctors out there who are also admitting, I'm giving into this because the family seems sure, the child seems sure, and I'm hoping for the best for this kid. But there's no real data behind this. There's no research to back this up. So what's interesting to me is, like, not only is this conversation going on right now, but there is data to back it up. We have, since the onset of hormone blockers and natural synthetic hormones being given to postmenopausal women, we are very clear about the risks of giving hormones, synthetic hormones, to a human being. We know that there is a much more higher propensity for osteoporosis. We know that there's a much more higher propensity for cancers.
Hmm.
There's a lot of biological side effects that comes with this, but because we're dealing with postmenopausal women, women in the, going towards the elderly stages of their lives, we are much more willing with their consent to take the risk.
Hmm.
But to not couple this information that is already out there with this particular situation, because I mean, yes, we're talking about two different populations here. We're talking about, older women who are dealing with uncomfortable, side effects of menopause, and they're willing to try something, even if there is the risk, the health risk behind it. But these women are making a very clear and conscious choice. They're no longer in reproductive ages, and they know that their decision will only affect themselves.
Okay. Right.
We're completely eliminating that data, and we're saying, okay, our children are a whole new category, and we're not going to add data we already have
Right.
because they are postmenopausal women, and we've already put them, these taboo women, in another category. And we're not considering that all of the side effects that they have to deal with and they've accepted is something that children will have to deal with from the onset of their lives and for the rest of it, whatever is left. So we're choosing osteoporosis. We're choosing, to induce, some cancer risks. We're choosing to induce some thyroid risks, some endocrine risks, because we're not putting the science data together for some reason.
Yeah, but a lot of people are unaware of the science risk, though. I mean, you have people.
Why? I mean, how many
Why?
families have
Well,
older postmenopausal women in their families? Why are we unaware of that data? I know that, like, we're and I like that you brought that up because menopause is a taboo issue. That is an issue that's isolated for women community, women, and let me say that again, women community,
Okay.
and it's isolated to them, and it's a taboo topic because um, aging women is not a topic that the world wants to talk about.
Okay.
Yet at the same time, we're going to give those same endocrine blockers, we're going to give those same hormones to children and expect that there's going to be a different outcome.
Right.
And why? Because one group, women over a certain age, are being considered a taboo topic. And on the other hand, we want to pretend like our children who are confused, which is a normal state,
Right.
once again, that their confusion should be treated by medication that has not been thoroughly explained
Right.
clearly, um, like you said, not looking at data that's already there. Now, is there a chance that a younger body is going to have different adversities to this medication? We have no idea, but we at least have the data, plentiful data of what's happening to people who are who are transitioning into the older phases of their lives. And we know what side effects they have been facing for decades now. And we're not presenting that evidence to this particular topic.
Right.
That's disturbing to me. That is also another distortion.
Right.
So we're changing the nature, we're changing the reality of facts, and we're not considering the science here. And
Mm.
this I have a huge, huge problem with because, already as a person, sorry, this is a little tight. As a person who, has to really look at the side effects and the propensity for older people, why would I not look at those same, side effects and propensities for young people and know that they will have to deal with these issues for a much longer term of their lives?
Right.
So I see that you're looking for something in particular.
Yeah, I
Uh,
was yeah, just trying to pull some articles, but no, you're good. Nature Mom, you're good. I was going to pull some articles from last week actually, um, because I know that we had talked about well now I guess they're now catching up. You know, they have in the articles Muslims versus transgenders or LGBT communities. So I find it very interesting because they automatically assume that uh, Muslims, Hispanics, they automatically assume that they're going to be on the side of the Democratic Party on the left and all that. But it's funny because a lot of these people are traditionally to the right. And when they come here, it's like, I don't know why the Democrats will assume these people are going to go to the left. And even if they go to the left, it's only temporarily. They're like, hey, I'm to the right of this topic. And so, yeah, you know,
Well, I think that it really comes back down to that one word, that I keep asking, for the last couple of weeks now: distortion.
hmm
So they've distorted the views that, minority groups, which are actually majority. There's been so much distortion in the history of Western culture that it's just assumed that we're going to keep falling for these distortions.
right, right.
The bend away from natural.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is, as more and more science is made available at our fingertips, that
hmm
we're able to fact check, that we're able to cross reference, that we're able to like find other data to support, peer reviewed information.
Right,
There's this assumption that we're going to keep falling for these distortions. And the bottom line is, no, we are actually becoming much more, aware of how to seek out data. We're becoming much more aware of, how to find out what is the true potential of what can happen to our children in the long run. Um, There is,
But doesn't it just come back to like teaching? Well, and I know this sounds so cliche, but teaching your family at home first and teaching, we don't, I mean, teaching family values and structure at home first. And so that they don't pick the values up at school or on the streets
I mean, I
or in
think
the
that
media or in the movies.
that's something that's important to bring to light, is that
Mhm.
most families have not defined their values as a family. Most families, they follow,
Yeah, but what the
cultural.
person say just individually? I mean, it doesn't that just come down to the individual say, you know what, that's not my right for my kids. It just starts there. That's not right for
Mm.
my kids.
But once again, I think that a lot of these parents who are electing to have their children start these hormone therapies, and who are electing to have elective surgery, they're not doing it because they are lacking family values. They're mostly doing it because they're pressured into feeling like, I want my kids to be happy in this cultural context. And what they find, I think, in the end, is that the cultural context is not designed to for individual joy. The cultural context is designed for culture to survive. And
Hold on. So you're talking about collectivism as opposed to
correct,
individuality. So
correct.
if a
So
person's not
there's
striving for individuality, then they're going to be lost in the sauce per se.
and there's not a lot of individuality, because people are really fighting to like have some type of purpose, identity, culture. I mean, that's why we have nationalism, right? That's why we have religious fanaticism, is because people are trying to fit somewhere. And their ideologies, their belief systems are based on sometimes lineages of these ideologies being taught to them, and then them being sold these ideas, and not taught to question, and to really like dig into the data, and know what are the ultimate consequences of these behaviors, what past events have occurred. There's not a lot of people
But you
who.
can't teach individualism. I mean, individualism is
Yeah,
just
yeah,
making a stance. It's
in a
making us.
sense. Okay, so let's say, for example, true individualism. It
Mhm.
doesn't exist. You are not an individual. You live in a societal
Yeah, but
system
you can
that
make
has
individual
taught you
choices though that are best, what you feel suited for you, as opposed to the
within the
majority.
context of the choices that you're given, and that's called society.
No, I understand the society, but what I'm saying, even within society, like you might choose to eat a certain way, or you might choose to not drink and smoke. You might choose to. So even I see what you're saying about the choices. Like even within the choices, there's a box parameter. But even in the box parameter, you still can
I mean,
make a conscious choice individually.
even with the choices, you're choosing from the categories you've been given. None of your choices are individual. I mean, let's be honest. Every choice that you're making and
Well,
you
but how can you
believe.
make that statement though if you don't have? I mean, you have to have something to point to and say, well, this is the standard, like this, or this is not the standard. Like, how do you make? I mean, I hear what you're saying, but how do you make that judgment? How do you make that
Okay.
determination that we don't have the
So
choices?
I'm going to tell you from a clear, sociological and psychological point of view, that's being taught in academic realms. There is no individual choice. Everything that you know is from what you've either modeled from someone else, or that
Mhm.
you've been, taught from some source or another. It's not from your own ideals.
Okay,
So,
so granted, let's just say, okay, I'll give you that, granted, but who's to say choice A is more better than choice B? That's for that individual to decide which is
and
better.
And I think that that's where, like knowing the skill of research and knowing the skill of,
Yeah, but even within the
taking
research, you're talking about other people's opinions, other people's
of
data.
other people's data.
Right. And
Exactly.
so still
But
as an individual, you have to make the better choice. You have to say,
and
you
I
know
think
what?
that that's the thing. When you can get information more from randomized, studies, when you can get them from, sources that are not controlled, you are able to compare that situation to distortions and opinions, for example.
Okay.
Um, and so if I'm making a choice and I know that it's for the well-being of my children, and I know that all the choices within the society or within a spherical realm, there's only so much that we can get inside of this ball. But I know that these choices could put my children into potential harm's way and could lead them down a road of nonstop chronic illness.
Right.
Yet I know that these choices, there's enough collective data done in a random studies and multiple random studies brought together that
Mhm.
shows me that these random situations happen, and they're showing the similar results. They're showing that if I follow these practices, then I have a better outcome than these practices.
Right.
So I think that that's pretty much what we're left with in society. We're left with, and let's be honest, on our own, we're left with complete darkness. We're left with starting over completely. You have to learn all the data on your own, do your own studies, thousands of years of studies left all up to you to figure out within your lifetime. And I don't think that that's the best option either. So when
But
we're
I
look
mean, a person might ask, well, aren't you taking away that person's individuality by you saying, well, I don't think that's I
the
mean, that's your
the
individual
person
choice.
has no individuality if they're living in society. That's also a distortion. And so I don't even waste my time with that kind of conversation. Do I think I'm an individual? Yeah, I mean, I am one individual of the collective. And but I think that saying that I'm an individual in a society is a distortion, and I don't buy into that either. So until I have completely found my own system and I've broken away from the overall system, I'm not truly an individual. I'm a
But why do we have to
constituent.
break away from a system if the system apparently is beneficial for people to live in big cities, to,
So
have
therefore,
air conditioning?
you are a constituent. You're not an individual.
Hmm. Okay, well, MD
I
said he's
man.
got to come. He's on the road, but he's got to come up because he wants to. He's like, So, shout out to MD, man. When you get a chance, you can pull over, man. Get on, get on, get on, get on, MD.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So so I
um,
also agree when we're following the ideologies of our churches or religious, sects, when we are following the ideologies of our families, when we're following the ideologies of our schools, we're still following an ideology. When we're following the ideologies of our groups who are focused on gender
okay,
and what that
so
definition is, it's not individual, it is contextual.
but even in with the society, you have as an individual, you have the choice to make choice A or choice B. And what I'm saying
Exactly.
is that people, uh, you know, with the whole transgender thing, I'm on your side when you say, you know what, it don't need to be to our kids. So what I'm trying to get to is that,
Hmm.
you know, um, individually we are making choices saying no, we don't agree. Like if the mass is saying, oh, this is right, and you got people, individuals saying no, this is not right. This is not what we agree with. They're individually making that choice and that stand is what I'm saying. But you're disagreeing with that.
Yeah, because I think that most people's point of view,
Hmm.
even mine, my ideologies of what a male or a female are based on what I was taught, is based on the science and the
The
stance that I
science.
have now on the
Hmm.
science,
Hmm.
which did not individually come from me. And the stance that I have about it right now, the way that Information is being, in my opinion,
Yeah,
distorted
but
in
even
media.
though, but even though Nature
Let me
Mom,
finish.
okay, go ahead. All
It's
right,
different. It's being altered from the science that was taught 30, 20, even 10 years ago.
okay,
There is, so when you start to change the information, you teach us one thing and then you try to change it. Then I start to ask the question as an individual.
right,
I start to ask the question,
right,
okay, you taught me this and now you're changing what what you've taught me. And so once again, in both of those situations, you taught me this. Now you're changing what you taught me. Now, as an individual, I'm stuck in the middle, having to process it and think about it. Where most people are just going, okay, well, now the data is just different. So I'm just going to change with the data. Where some of us are standing back and going, well, exactly how has the data changed and what evidence is there to the change in this data?
right. Like myself, challenging the data, like I said, because again, learning about the uterus which forms life, or hold the eggs or the sperm or whatever to reproduce. I've been taught that there's women out here that don't have functioning uteruses. So how can a transgender male jump ahead of the line of all these women that been trying to have kids for centuries and years and years and years, and all of a sudden this transgender male jump ahead of the line of evolution and now can have a kid? I just
There's
that would be a
no
scientific
jumping,
breakthrough,
and
huh?
there's no jumping ahead of the line of evolution because
Right.
biologically that person is a woman.
And that's so individual. That was just my individual
Thought process. Yeah.
uh
Uh,
yeah, thought process. That's what I came, that was my analysis. And I'm like, wait a minute. They haven't even had that scientific breakthrough yet for even women.
So, I mean, I think that that's just it, and once again, like I said in the very beginning of this conversation, I keep bringing up, this idea of distortion
Okay.
because I think that when we really don't look at what is distortion in definition and conversation, then we don't start to ask, well, where have we gotten away from nature in this? Now,
Well, real
do I have a
quick,
problem? Okay.
MD just made a very good point. He says the society benefits from the achievement of individual, not the other way around. That's actually a true statement.
From where?
From you, let's look at Martin Luther King, George Washington Carver. Let's look at Webb Du Bois, Malcolm X. These were individuals.
And
Oprah
yet,
Winfrey.
and yet none of their efforts were actually gained on an individual basis. They were all gained on a mass basis. So it's
Huh?
really hard. Yes. I mean,
How?
even
Okay,
Martin
okay.
Luther King, he didn't do that march alone. He marched over and over with a group of people. He rallied people together. He was a very
But he rallied
charismatic
them as an
figure.
individual.
No, he rallied a group, and it was the group that had the
Right.
power.
He rallied the group. So he, as an individual, rallied the
And
group.
and he was actually rallied into it, if we really liked,
And there was an
touch on true
individual.
history.
Well, and it was an individual that rallied him up. There was an
Actually, it
individual
was a
that did
group
that.
of people, if we
Well,
want
what
to
I'm saying is
be
that the idea started with
historically.
an individual.
It started with a group, actually. I mean, you can say maybe one. I never found that there was one particular person that
Okay, so
sold
what about
into this idea.
inventions like penicillin? Like I don't know the like
Ah,
individual.
penicillin. I love that because
Okay.
penicillin was actually, people don't realize this either, was a group effort. So the doctor who is credited with discovering penicillin, he didn't discover it. He accidentally left food out. And it was his
Mhm.
colleague that saw that something happened within this, cultured environment. And it was his colleague that actually said, you are onto something. So once again, it wasn't an individual situation. It was a group effort there.
Uh, I don't know. I guess that'd be up for debate because I'm still
No,
not seeing
it's
how it's a
science.
group. Yeah, it's science, but it was an individual that
It
said,
was the
"Oh,
end of
look at that."
no, it was one
It was
individual
one
who made a
person, right?
mistake
Right? Okay,
and a colleague
and
who
it was
recognized the
colleague was
mistake
okay. So
as
that
as
colleague,
a potential environment that they could explore. So it wasn't an individual effort.
MD, you got to come on up here because I'm maybe he
Just,
can
you
get.
know,
I'm not.
I
Yeah,
mean, science
I'm
I
not.
discovered very recently as well, because we all thought the penicillin came from one guy who discovered it.
Mhm,
No, that's not the facts. No, it came from
mhm.
a group effort. And
Okay, the Wright brothers, or well, I guess the invention of uh, the automobile, which we benefit as society. The world benefits from automobiles. That came from one
and
person.
it didn't come from one person. It actually also came from a group. So these were a group of engineers, even if they were self-taught engineers,
Hmm.
and they were in competition with each other. They had their own society. So it's the same as the painters. It wasn't just like Monet and Van Gogh. It was a group who spanned across Europe, and they were inspiring each other. And then it even carried into Mexico and America. It was a group who created this, this impressionist uh, eh, period. It wasn't an individual. So I know it's like, yeah, someone did, let's say, create this, one idea, but it's a a society of people who've been working towards this race to answering a question. It's not usually one person by themselves that comes up with a question and then somehow answers the question.
Right.
It's usually an ongoing race to find the ultimate answer, that best fits. And that's what's great about science, is that, like, it's not about an individual. It's about information that we can carry forward and we can improve upon as we get more information, and the information is being passed down from generation to generation. And this concept, I mean, it's beautiful because, on one hand, yes, you can be your individual. You can have your coffee, black with cinnamon, and you can have your coffee with, cream and honey, and
Hmm.
that makes you an individual. But neither one of you created coffee. So, I think that that's the misnomer here, is that, we are individuals and we're creating our own. No, actually, you're living in a society you've been handed. You're living with values and cultural ideologies that you've also been handed. And you're working within the constructs of those ideologies.
Yeah, but
So
even
it's the same here. We're being like, we're being altered ideologies right now.
but I
And
disagree because the individual comes up with a critical thought. The critical thought does not involve groupthink. The critical thought relies on the individuals to come up with certain solutions. That's not a group think. Groupthink is not what's the word I'm looking for, nature mom. That's not the yeah. Groupthink doesn't come up with the critical thought. Let me just keep it at that.
okay, so let me just break down something to you.
Okay.
On that particular topic, getting away from everything else we've been talking
Hmm.
about. When you're only talking about this particular, in an individual, question society, where do you think that they get the questions from?
Oh, say that again. I'm sorry.
Where do you think this individual gets their ideology to question something?
I think they get it. I mean, just like I said, it's a learned behavior, but they still formulate. You have still have to formulate that thought on the spot with certain things because even though we've been reared and taught certain things and values, society changes, technology changes, and okay, let me give you an example. Um, the vaccines. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people didn't come yeah, let's just say the vaccines. Vaccines, people were very skeptical. People were very antsy about taking something that they've never taken before. And this thing was new. The COVID came out. So people individually were critical thinking, like, wait a minute, you know, I don't know. That has this thing been tested? How long has it been around? These were individuals asking these questions, Nature Mom. This
Okay.
wasn't a
So
group thing.
tested.
The majority of the group were just taking the shot, taking the booster, taking the other booster, and taking another booster. And people not answering questions like, wait a minute, you said that this booster, the first shot would be okay. Oh, yeah, yeah, but take another booster. Oh, wait. Oh, take another booster, and take another booster, and take another booster. Like people individually had to come up and say, wait a minute. Hold up. Wait a minute. So these were individuals saying something's not right here. These were individuals that had to critically think and say, wait a
Mhm.
minute. Something doesn't sound right, and people are dying. They weren't telling people that were dying from that more people died from these vaccines and shots and boosters, and you need 5 boosters, and we went from 1 booster to 2 boosters, 3 boosters, 4, but 5 boosters. Do it every 6 months. Now we're gonna do it every year. Do it every other week, and it's like,
Okay.
huh? So
So Black
individually, we
Sun,
had to say, wait a minute.
if I can leave you because I have to leave at this
Okay,
point
no problem, no
because I have
problem.
another something waiting here. But so what you're telling me is there's people who learned the ideology of just follow and obey,
Right.
and then there's people who learn the ideology of
Question.
scientific method. So fine, what's the problem here? Let's come up with a question, let's come up with a hypothesis, let's experiment, let's test this idea. And both of those are led schools of practices, both of them. So what you're saying to me is not something new. What you're saying to
No, it's
me
not
is,
new, but
yeah, so and I wouldn't say it's individualistic in either one of those cases. I would say you have the school of thought, which is many schools of thoughts, right?
mhm,
But in these two scenarios, we're talking about the school of thought of follow and obey,
mhm.
which usually falls along, in the ideologies of parenting, of religion, of, society, government. And then you have the idea of, critical thinking, exactly as you said, which usually falls in the sciences. So we're talking about,
Okay.
philosophy, we're talking about science, we're talking about in what used to be psychology and sociology, where we question all the views. Unfortunately, I feel like, just the last thing I'll say on this
Okay.
topic, I feel like the sciences of sociology and psychology in the realm of transgenderism and the politics behind that are starting to shift towards the follow and obey category.
Right. I agree with that.
And
I agree.
they used to stand in the categories of science. And what we need them to do as we move forward, because we're not individuals, we are a collective group here. We are society, and that's what society is, collective. We need very clear definitions
But if we
of.
were collective, then why did we have people pushing it back against the vaccines?
So once
If
again,
the
that
collective
because
was the
because
collective was taking
you
the
have the
vaccine.
I because you also have the school of critical thought and scientific method.
Okay.
Science questions everything, and then we experiment and we look for the facts and we keep experimenting so we can see what things repeat themselves in patterns and what things are just
But that
ideologies that
means
belong in the other group
that
of
means the
just follow and obey.
but that would mean there would have been a larger collective of, I guess, media saying, "Wait a minute, hold up, this hasn't been tested." So that
But
thought would
media
have to
falls
run up.
into the follow and obey, in my opinion. When you
So
start
then,
to have like agenda and paid groups, paid, like behaviors, then
mhm,
no, that's not scientific questioning. That's just follow. That's do what your
right,
boss tells you to do because you're getting a paycheck. And I don't put those people into the science arena at all. Some scientists are starting to follow in. Well, we're being funded for this, and that's why you see in a lot of these new like studies, they have to divulge, any discrepancies in their studies. Are you being paid, to do this by whom? Are there any conflicts of interest? You have to divulge that information now because people are applying scientific method even to reading science data and really trying to find out, okay, so is this just sensationalism or is this real scientific study, that doesn't benefit anyone, but just gives us, we ask a question and we're seeking answers here.
Right.
But both of them fall under a community. I don't really. There's very few people in this world left who really live under individualistic rule, and more and more of those people are being pinched out. The people who felt differently, than the mainstream societies that we're trying to develop in the past, they're always, assassinated one way, whether it's physically assassinated, mentally assassinated, or socially assassinated.
Hmm.
There's usually some type of assassination of them because the world doesn't want individuals, not true individuals. So I think that when we're talking, this is a completely different subject that we can dig so much deeper into, because we can
It's a different
bring.
subject, but you can actually pinpoint the you can pinpoint keys to fight back actually. So even though because I'm assuming the norm is to accept transgenderism, the communal idea,
It's
like, oh,
I won't
so
say it's the norm, but it's definitely being pushed as the major propaganda, like,
absolutely,
at
absolutely.
this time. And it makes me, ask other questions as a scientist would. What's the, purpose behind this? Who would gain? Who's
Mhm.
promoting? So it brings a lot of, list of questions as we're taught in the science community to do.
Right.
But when we're just talking about, like, follow and just do what you're told, yeah, there is this, like, well, we should just accept everyone. But there's not this, just accepting everyone. It's more following into the category of fanaticism, as would a Unabomber or any other people, where you're forcing these ideologies on people and you're not taking responsibility of the repercussions.
Right.
And to me,
I.e. the vaccines.
like, many areas of society,
I mean, yeah,
it's
many.
just,
I was just what that was just
yeah,
one. Yeah,
right. It's
yeah.
just like, we say it's right, so you do it the way we say it's right. And if you oppose this, then we are going to persecute you. And I think that that's when I start to ask the question, okay, so who is choosing that, one voice is stronger of another, especially in a freedom of speech,
Right. Good point.
society.
Yes.
And so and we used to have a society. I mean, that's what America was supposed to stand for: freedom of speech. Everybody has a say. We get to bring everything to the table and bring true democracy. True democracy is gone, because we're only having groups who are trying to gain numbers. And that's exactly why I say to you that there is no individualistic, aspect to our society. There's only trying to gain majority. And I think that that's very important to understand when we're talking about politics, ideologies, core beliefs, nationalism, all of these things. It's a number game. So in this particular game, I think that it's a number game as well. It's very politically, focused. And when you're going after kids, to gain your numbers, that's guerrilla warfare, in my opinion. We would shun countries like Africa, and we do, when they go out and they recruit children to raise them for their armies. But in a sense, this is the same thing. They're,
Well, see, but that's why I disagree with you on the politics, because you have in Michigan a Muslim community that felt a certain way, and they're like, we want our society to go this way, and having the gay flag and transgender and all this stuff is not part of our politics, not part of our
because
culture.
they're the
And so
because
they
they are the majority in that area.
right, so they put the people on the board, which involves the politics, and voted that we need to take that flag down because it's not a representation of us, and they just so happen to be Muslims.
So what would happen when their group is infiltrated,
Then
and
the
then
politics will go the other way.
politics will change. So
Right.
that's why they're politics. And that's why, I put it into, far away from the category of science, which is just like really, testing and looking for facts, versus, trying to, let's
Yeah, but
say,
then we're talking
pressure
about,
towards obedience.
yeah, but when we talk about politics, I mean, it kind of infringes on the, it kind of, you delving into the culture and customs, and that's why I said the customs and cultures of most Islamic societies is not the basic cultures and customs of the LGBTQ society. There's conflict there. These are
And
two societies that have their own conceptual cultures. And
right.
so the politics is the vehicle in pushing their culture to be the dominant, to make sure that their culture is the dominant culture
A race for
at
numbers.
that particular right in that particular society or that particular city or community.
So absolutely, I think that we're saying the same thing in
I think
different
we are, yeah,
ways.
yeah.
And I mean, I think that that's something that we have to be the most careful of because, like I said, it's very. I think that there's something very poignant to the fact that, like, the psychology classes I took over 20 years ago
Uh-huh.
say a very different thing in the same academic realm than the psychology classes that I'm taking recently. And the only reason why I
Right,
took
right,
the current psychology classes is because I wanted to be abreast on what's being taught in current psychology versus, compare it to what I've learned in the past.
right,
And yes, information does evolve, but
right.
it doesn't totally distort the way that it's distorting now. And I
I
think
agree.
that
Right,
that's something that's very interesting is like the complete distortion
right.
of definitions and the complete distortions of reality. And it's
Complete
not
distortions equal
real.
agenda.
And the bottom line is, and this is the last thing I'll say for tonight, it's not realistic that a man is pregnant. It's not
Right.
realistic.
It's
There's
not scientific
nothing
either, right?
realistic about it at all.
Right.
That is a female body, whether that person took their hormones and had their elective surgeries or not. It's a female anatomy. So no wonder the female anatomy is able to produce a child and to gestate it.
Right. Because the core of that is a functioning uterus, which again, science has not allowed us yet to transfer a functioning uterus from one human being to another human being. I mean, we've had functioning hearts, we've had functioning kidneys,
Livers.
functioning livers, but a functioning uterus, no, they had not been able to do it.
And in many transgender cases, they've shared information about, like, elective surgeries becoming, let's say, ornamental, but maybe not even functional.
Right.
And yet you're telling me that you've made a male
Right.
into a functional baby carrying entity.
Right. That's why I just went straight to the chase and said this is fantasy. That's why I cut through all. When I see people trying to play me, not you, Nature Mom, but like Vanity
No,
Fair,
but
I just
overall.
get through the chase. Like what's going on here? You know what I'm saying? I'm the type of person. I guess we being from South Central LA. When people are doing a 3 card money in New York and Philly, we don't go for it. It's like no, we don't go for it. And so that's
And
what I'm
let's
saying. That
say,
huh?
we know that and let's say we know that the term transgender is a much shorter cut than saying this is a woman who decided she was confused about her gender and started to take hormones and did elective surgeries to become a man, but left some parts
Hmm.
and now is pregnant and looks like a male, cut off all the parts to look like a male, but is still female having a baby. It's much shorter to say transgender male pregnant.
Right.
But I think that's just the important thing is like understanding when you're getting bamboozled in a way.
Hmm.
This
Yeah, bamboozle.
and this is some bamboozling. Like,
Yeah.
we know that we're looking at, and science will tell us in itself that this is a female, this is a woman
Hmm.
in her chromosomal state. Okay, I'm not even touching on her sociological state. I'm not talking about her psychological state. In the you know biological and anatomical state, this is a functioning woman, a
Right.
functioning female. And am I going to give her, a whole bunch of titles when I'm writing my report about it? No. I'm going to make my report as concise as possible because I
Right.
probably have another 1500 words to add at least to this report. So I'm not going to add a whole bunch of other, colorful terms. We're talking about a female body producing a child.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I would say that in a personal setting, I would say if someone's trying to convince me otherwise, it is bamboozling. You know, this is a person who is dealing with distortion, self distortion, and they've done elective surgeries to further enhance this distortion.
Right.
And the natural state of this human being is female.
There it is. There it is. Do we need to do another show on this, or do we? I mean, is the case closed?
I'm sure there's a lot more information to share,
Okay, that's fine.
but it depends on the audience. I mean, I think that most importantly, the things that we haven't really touched on yet is the overall ramifications for the children long term. Like, what are those two true ramifications,
Okay.
and where did this all start from? I think that's a very important piece
Right.
of information because it just kind of hit us out of nowhere, but it did begin from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding what was the start of this and the agenda behind it, to make this, instead of a quiet community, because there are some people that just have this, you know, uh, dysmorphia. They're not satisfied with who they're born. And so many people have it in so many different areas of psychology. They're
Right.
not they're not happy with their size. They're not happy with their skin color, right? Let's talk
But
about that.
but
Is there
again,
transgender, trans color? When
right,
somebody, it would Michael Jackson be considered trans color,
right.
trans pigment? I know he had vitiligo, but is there a problem with just living with vitiligo? you know uh Winnie, model Winnie, I always forget her last name. She lives with her vitiligo. We've had family members who've lived with vitiligo before in society. Is there a problem with just, being okay and learning how to cope and be okay with the anatomy and the body that
But
you're
again,
given?
I'm
Or
gonna have
what
to
is
I'm gonna have to be pushback. That's up to the individual to decide if that's okay or not.
But I think that it's not just
It's
up
not
to
a.
the individual, because let's be clear, if the individual remained societally less, and they were living on their own, because
Mm-hmm.
we have many studies about this as well. They found that the 11-year-old child who was completely neglected and at the age of 11 couldn't even sit up because they were never taught or were able to mimic the behavior of sitting up.
Mm-hmm.
Society teaches you this. They teach you the
No, but what I'm
behaviors.
yeah, but you're
So
taking away
let
that individual choice. If like I said, if Michael Jackson didn't want to live with
so
Benegado, you're
l-
saying, hey, it's okay. He's saying no, it's not okay. So where do
but
we,
let's be clear.
you know?
Would he have a problem with vitiligo if society didn't have a problem with it?
I don't
If
know.
he
That's
didn't
that's
have
kind of hard.
people that said to him, "What's wrong with you?
But it
Why
all
do you
starts
look
with an
different?"
individual thought of what people. If vitiligo, some people find
Usually
it
it doesn't start
problematic.
with and usually it doesn't start with individual thought, because individuals, and that's what I was sharing with you with this study about this 11-year-old. Individuals in on their own, they just accept the realities that are there. It is society that puts the thoughts of whether or not this is valued or unvalued, good or bad, into our psyche.
Yeah,
It's
but even
not
at
our
the end of the day,
individual.
even in what you're saying, okay, it's a collective thought. So you got the collective thought saying live with your Vinigado's condition. The other
No,
saying
they
not.
usually
So who?
don't. Yeah, they usually don't. I mean, let's be honest. This, person with vitiligo walks down the street
Uh huh.
just like a black person in deep Europe, and
Uh
everybody's staring at you because they haven't seen someone like you before.
huh.
So automatically, you're different and you feel different because society is treating you differently. And what you want to do is, if Freud already, talked about it, what we want, especially from the onset of adolescence, is to fit in. And so if all of a sudden you can't fit in because there's something that society deems different about you, then your only desire at that point is to get rid of this difference so that you can fit in. So, it's not an individual like ideology. It's something that is thrust upon us. And, this is like you can see this in psychology, you can see this in sociology. A person on their own would see nothing wrong, just like you see two small children from different cultures and they completely embrace each other. Yet, if their fathers, or mothers met as adults, then there would be these walls based on their heritage and their cultural points of view of how people of these different looks should be interacting with each other. It has nothing to do with their natural individual states.
So then I guess okay. So let me, because I know you got to go. So okay, so the collective thought on A and collective thought B. So who's determined who is right and who's wrong? There's always going to be an opposing collective thought saying vitiligo is, and some people say, oh, it's okay. So how do you? I mean, if this person chooses to go with group B, I
I mean,
mean,
I think that that has many layers of like psychological implications. How much suffering, let's talk about like the black people of, Eastern Europe. There's so many black people born there and their only language is Ukrainian or, Russian or Polish. Yet because they look black, they're not accepted by their mainstream society because their mainstream society still only sees that their citizens should look one particular way. So, so what's the problem there is that society says one thing, yet as an individual, I was born here, I speak the language, I went to school here, I have no other identity but here, and yet I'm told I don't belong here.
okay, real quick before you go, Nature Mom, I want to get MD on MD.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh no, I was just listening in, man. Like I said, I'm on the road, man. This is very interesting topic. Well, no doubt, no doubt.
So I got to get your take on what Nature Mom is saying about individualism and collectivism, real quick, if you can.
Go ahead, go. Well, you got a question?
No, no, no. I wanted to get your take on, because we're having a discussion about collectivism and individualism. I wanted to get your take real quick before, while you can.
I no, I will say this. Certain points of what next I'm saying, I agree with, but altruism in itself, we don't have to conform to that. So is it more about the collective or is it about conformity of each individual? I think it's conformity, but again, that's a choice. That's
Nature
what I
Mom?
would say.
Okay. Nature Mom?
It may be too loud on
Uh,
my end.
No, no,
it's
you good.
okay.
You good.
So it's a choice. I think remember that most of our choices are based upon resources and availability. Most people don't have the choice of being able to. They don't have the finances to be individualistic. You need the support of your system, and especially if, let's say, we'll go back to the topic of vitiligo. If you grew up where everybody in your neighborhood, you look different from them, and then you go outside of your neighborhood and you look different from them, and you're just constantly, on the outskirts. As you're growing up and you are trying to forge your life and you're trying to, go to school, you're trying to buy a house, you're hoping just to find as many allies as you can. And when you find those good allies, it's you go with who you can afford. You're not so choosy of like, well, that person is Asian, they're not from my neighborhood, I'm not going to go with them. But the ladies, from your neighborhood are a little suspicious and keep, rejecting meeting with you because you look, maybe, I don't know what they would call cursed, or is against their religious, ideologies based on the doctrine that they're given. But yet the Asian lady will see you and will show you the house that you want to buy within your price range and will work with you. Then you forge a new ally force, and you go with You go with the resources that you can afford. So I think that, like, when we talk about, if I can bring this back to transgenderism, with children, they don't know who they are. A lot of them don't have great home lives. Even if you're from, low middle class, upper class families, parents are, finding themselves too busy to parent you, and you're just looking for the allies to help you through as best as you can. And I think that the problem is that in those allies, you can find people who will prey on you because they see you're alone. You'll find people who will, let's say, share their points of views, and that will alter your points of views or pressure you into a different point of view, with malintent or not. Their intention may not be to hurt you in some way, and they just may be completely ignorant, to the fact that they are, like, causing you, more confusion or whatever the case may be. But as the individual, trying to find a home, a place, you're going where you can afford to have that, camaraderie.
Okay, so the pushback I would give on that. So we're talking about individualism. If you're basing it off of race, let's go back to the transgenderism thing. Is especially when it comes to kids, that's not the individual choice of the child. That's, for all intents and purposes, the choice of the parent who's conforming to what they believe their child wants to be. Now, here's the great thing about the American government. The American government protects the individual rights of all people, despite race, creed, or sexuality, anything of the sort. So the American government is protecting your right to choose. That's individualism
um okay,
in
so
and
I
of itself.
so let's just be very clear, because when we're talking about transgenderism for minors, there's, as I've mentioned earlier, there's no clear law, and I keep searching from US to, all the way to Europe. There's no clear law that supports a minor taking, hormone blockers. There's no clear law that supports underage, so minors, having elective surgery for anatomy, reassignment, and yet it's taking place. So what I would say to respond in response to what you just said is that America, particularly, um, is a country of opportunists, and they will sell your children out at a heartbeat if it's going to make them. Let's be clear, it's like upwards of $70,000 a treatment for hormone therapy, and over $100,000 for um, reassignment surgery. They'll sell you out in a heartbeat, because not only will you have to prescribe to the ongoing medications, not only will you have to prescribe to the surgery, but you have to prescribe to all of the treatments that go along with that for the rest of your life. There's a lot of good money in pharmaceuticals there. And America has already sold you out to those pharmaceutical companies. You can see it in your food. You can see it in your kids, your 9-year-olds growing boobs, and starting their periods where, even 20 years ago, it wasn't as rampant as it is now. So, um,
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but that's also individualism. But
um,
what I'm
you
saying,
know, it's a
go go,
definitely
go ahead.
an illusion of individualism.
Well, it's an illusion from the sense of you're confined to a certain aspect of that individual choice. I don't disagree with that. Like the other day, we were talking about food deserts. I mean, if you're confined to being in a place where there's food deserts, then yeah, that's where you would have to have some type of governmental intervention. But what I'm saying is, in the terms of the individualism on the capitalist side, yeah, it's money to be made in gender identification. But from the individualistic side of a social aspect, as a parent, you have to understand that this is a choice given to the individual. you can't necessarily make that choice for your child, nor legally can that child be of age to make that individual choice. So that's where set a precedent on what it is to protect the individual right.
And I think that if I just saw that you went out on that last part, and so I hope I'm not like misunderstanding where you closed out. But
Yeah,
what I will
I'll break
say,
yeah.
what I will
Yeah.
say is that like where does the line of individualism really become about the welfare of that individual? Because let's say, for example, back to the beginning of our conversation, let's take out the cost. Now, you really care about the welfare of that individual. You're going to eliminate, or you're going to, as a government, you're going to cover those costs now. Oh,
Oh,
we lost them.
dropped off. Dang. Ooh.
Okay,
Y'all
so
having
we're
a
going to
good
say,
conversation.
the American government covers those costs. So therefore, now these hormone therapies, these elective surgeries are all on the bill of the American government. I guarantee you that there will be very different points of view about who and when these individuals should have these elective, therapies and surgeries than what's happening now from private bank accounts. There will be a very different team of advisors and who will accept what. I mean, let's be honest, you guys, look at your private insurances that you pay for. When you want, a basic, procedure done, they're calling you, post haste, are we sure you need that? I need to make sure that you need this, and we have to verify this before we'll pay for it. Yet, if we put the bill on the government, I don't think that it would be as, let's say, individual rights as it is now, because we've seen it before. So, I'm not disrespecting any way of what MD was saying, about individualistic approach to life. But what I am saying is that when individualistic approach to life has a very, very large price tag attached to all of these, doctors who get to experiment on our children, um, out of fear of not being, not making the money, but also being deemed as, being demonized for not adhering to the individual child's um, ideals, that they're not sure who they are. And guess what? They're a child. They're not sure who they are. But um, if we put the bill in the American government's hand versus individuals' hands, I think that we would have a very different narrative of what they deem as being individualistic rights, and what should be available to each human being. And I guarantee you, this would not be on the list of bills for them to pay.
Right. Okay. Well, Nature Mom, look like MD dropped off, and I know you got to
Yeah,
go, but
yeah, I
man,
have to go
great conversation, man. Shout out to
as
MD.
usual.
Yeah, shout out to Nature Mom, man. Shout out to E, man. He was trying to get on, but he was having difficulties. Shout out to you, E. I'll give you a call. Yeah. Um, we got to continue this. Got to continue this next week because, like I said, this thing goes deep.
Yeah, it's a huge rabbit hole, and
It is. It is. It really is.
and I think that, like, that's the one thing, individualistic. Does that mean financially? Or does that mean for overall well-being? And that's something we have to define.
Right. Well, I'm sure MD will go back and listen to this because I don't want to answer it for him, but because it's funny because he had a debate on individualism versus communalism when it comes to economics. So I'm going to let him
Oh,
answer
this
that
would be
next.
right there up that alley.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
All right.
So thank you for tonight.
All right. So 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Yes.
Okay, cool, cool. All right, man. And shout out to the crew. Thank Jersey, everybody on your end, man.
Uh,
Thank y'all. Cause yeah, it was smoother this week. It was way smoother. So
oh,
yeah, yeah,
oof. Yes. Thank goodness for them.
yeah.
Well, I will definitely send them big thanks, and I know that they're quite often listening to the show, so
Cool.
they're probably listening right now. So big highs to you guys, and thank you so much.
Right, right. And shout out to people on Rumble. Like I said, Rumble. Shout out to the people on Facebook. We got some extra avenues, and we're gonna start expanding in more avenues too. Not just YouTube, but definitely allow more people, different social medias to come on and participate, watch, and yeah.
Comment.
So yeah. All
Well,
right,
thank you,
y'all. We out, y'all. Peace.
thank you.
We out. Let me get the closure.
Mhm.
Uh-oh. Wait a minute. Where's the closing? Oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. I can't find the closing. Oh, here it is. Okay.